We on? Okay. So we want everybody here to get a chance to get one of Arlene's, oh my, what is this? Oh. Spanish. God, there's some Spanish things here.
There are some Spanish things there.
Yeah.
If you know a Spanish reader,
If you know if Spanish readers, solos los hechos.
then take a Spanish book.
So anyway, we're gonna have a drawing later on, and so what I want you to do is at the break, put in your other half of your ticket here. Okay. You have two ends of your ticket, right? There's a number on each end. Got it? So you tear it in half and give me one half, and you keep the other half. That's a cheap way. Instead of having double tickets, we just have one ticket with two numbers on it. Two of the same numbers on it. All right? Anybody not get a ticket? Anybody not? Okay. So just remember to put half of before the drawing. We'll have you put your halves in here, or you can put them up in here at the break. So, anyway, we want to welcome you back, and as Dr. Arlene continues her forays into the mind, and this afternoon the theme is kind of emotions, what you can control, what you can, and about EQ, emotional intelligence, being more important than your IQ, and more important than the DQ. So, all right, let me offer a word of prayer as we start. Father in heaven, we thank you once again for this opportunity that we have to learn and to especially get our minds in tune with how you created it to be in the first place. Somehow we've gotten it disordered many times, and through upbringing, through misinformation, and through media, and all kinds of other things that tends to mess things up. So we pray that you'll help us learn the truth about how you created our minds and the balance that you created it to be, and help us to come away with practical things we can do to harmonize our minds in line that you would have us to be, so that we can have that abundant, healthful life that you want us to have. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Now, I'd like this afternoon to be relaxed, have you stay wide awake, feel good. We just had lunch. It was a good lunch. So, anytime you feel like it, stand up, plenty of room to walk, move around. Here's the research. 50% of brains in studies that were done needed to be standing and moving in order to learn. That's the reason I believe, the years I was a school nurse, a lot of little kids don't learn. They come to school and they're told to sit down, shut up, be still, do your work, and they have to move to learn, and they don't learn. So if I had my choice, every classroom would be half sitting and half standing desks, and kids could move around back and forth between them. Because even the 50% that don't have to have a lot of active movement have to have some. And while they're learning, we're not talking about recess, we're talking about while they're learning. So a kid misbehaves in school, it's usually one that needs to move to learn. And what's the punishment? Miss recess. Instead of being out there moving so they can come back and learn. You know, we are way behind brain research in education, unfortunately. All right, I'm going to move quite quickly through this because there's two parts. You will be able to get the PowerPoints off my website if you want. It's being streamed. So we're going to go through this quite quickly. We're going to start with another set of brain benders. Every time you do this, you're putting another layer of myelin insulation down on the brain pathway, so it should be getting easier and easier and easier. So, top left. The word is out. Back out. Good. What else? Are the letters touching each other?
Spaced out.
Spaced out. Out of touch. We could probably go on a long time. That's part of creativity. All right, second on the left.
Chinese checkers.
Chinese checkers. What else? I was doing a presentation in another country, and I showed them this batch, and Chinese checkers was fine with me. I was going on to the next one, and somebody said, wait a minute, why can't that be check on the Chinese? Third on the left, a word in a word. Yes, throw in the towel. Good. How about fourth on the left?
Sign on the dotted line.
Okay, it could be sign on the dotted line. What else could it be? Nobody signed on the dotted line. And there might be something else that you can think of. Top right. Good timing. Timing is good either way. Second on the right. Look on the bright side. Third on the right. Light at the end of the tunnel. Good. Fourth on the right. Sit down. Sit on something. In fact, that's really what I was thinking of. Where are these lines? Are they in the middle? Or are they on a side? Sit on the sidelines. Now, look how fast you did that, relatively speaking. It's impressive. All right. Part one, we'll take a break. We'll do part two. So ask yourself, what does success mean to me? Because success is different for every brain. And often if one brain tries to be successful the way another brain is successful, it doesn't work. Would you like to be more successful within your definition of success? It is possible to do that. It begins with understanding emotions and identifying your current level of emotional intelligence, which always begins in the brain. So here's another set of PET scans. This is a normal PET scan, and this is a PET scan of a brain that is stressed. Can you understand by looking at that? When a brain is really stressed, you can't think clearly, you don't make good decisions, you do not perceive options, you go back to the old routines kind of thing, may relapse into addictive behaviors. Because look at how the brain changes when you're very stressed compared to this nice, bright thinking, normal just means commonly occurring, brain scan. All right. I only talk about 4 core emotions, and those 4 emotions are joy, anger, fear, and sadness. And this is the emotion staircase, joy, anger, fear, and sadness, because those are the 4 emotions you can see on the face of the fetus during pregnancy based on what's happening to the mother. You will notice that euphoria is one step above joy. It is not a separate emotion. It is just a brief period of intense joy. The brain was never designed to live at euphoria. It's too intense. So when people don't have a joyful life, don't know how to attain one, they often get involved in an addictive behavior. And it gives them some brief episodes of pseudo-joy, but it's too intense for the brain. And if they get their supposed joy with a harmful drug, they tend to burn out on average about age 37. And I'm aiming to be a supercentenarian. That's a way, way, way past 37. We know that the fetus appears to know whether it's wanted or not, or it's an accident or whatever. If it's the desired gender, did the family want a boy and get a girl? Did they want a girl and get a boy? It knows based on what it picks up during those 9 months of pregnancy whether the environment in which it's going to be birthed is dangerous or whether it's safe and happy and comfortable and they'll be loved. We used to think that researchers used to think that when the baby was born it was pretty much a blank slate. And that's way far from the truth. That fetus knows a whole lot when it comes out the chute. When you do PET scans, positron emission tomography, and you feel joyful, you're not necessarily hanging off the ceiling, but you're happy, joyful, the left hemisphere lights up. So the current belief is that joy is a left hemisphere function. When one of the three protective emotions, anger, fear, and sadness, occur, the right hemisphere lights up. Because those are protective emotions. Anger tells you when your boundaries have been invaded. Fear tells you that you're in danger. It might not be actual danger, it might be imagined danger, but it's telling you it, your brain thinks it's in danger, and sadness tells you that you have experienced a loss. And it will give you energy to grieve that loss and climb back up to joy. Did you grow up knowing that all emotions are positive? Who grew up knowing that? I don't think any of us did. All of the core emotions are positive. They're given to us for a reason. The behaviors around them are often negative, but not the information itself. Some people think that shame and guilt are emotions. Some researchers don't believe they are. They believe that shame and guilt are what they are calling emotional interrupters, meaning that it interrupts what's going on at the moment to give you a moment to reflect and see if you want to course correct. And surprise and disgust are not emotions, but they're emotional motivators. So whatever emotion arises, if it's a surprise, it may be stronger. If you're disgusted, it may be stronger. So back to, you can only manage effectively what you can identify, label, and describe. When an emotion arises in your brain and moves throughout your body, can you identify which emotion it is, put a label to it, and describe how it's impacting you? If you can't, start practicing. And sometimes, since all emotions, when they arise, have similar physiological effects, sometimes you have to look at what's going on in the environment and think, what would be the most appropriate emotion for this environment? You know, if it's your birthday and you're 123, trust me, it'll be joy. You know, if something scary has happened, it might be fear. If somebody is exhibiting bullying behaviors towards you, it might be anger. If there's a loss, it might be sadness. Get in the habit, when you perceive an emotion, of identifying, label, and describing it, because that can help you as you work through it. What are emotions for? Sometimes people say to me, oh, if I just didn't have to deal with emotions, I'd be in such good shape. No, actually you wouldn't. Because emotions give us energy. And emotions are like the hands on a clock or a digital readout. Emotions give us information, and if you did not have them, you would be like a clock that's not working, because they give you the emotions. So they're designed to get your attention, connect the conscious with the subconscious mind that's always working, gives you information, gives you energy to take action, actually helps you make moral and ethical decisions, and binds your perceptions to your conscious beliefs, which actually can make beliefs get stronger and stronger and stronger, which is a good thing if they're accurate. It's not such a good thing if they're not good beliefs. 3 definitions. IQ is a range of inherited potential intelligence. There are some that think it's been far overemphasized, especially in Western cultures, because it's a range of academic ability, if you will. And that's prized much more in Western cultures than in some others. EQ is not emotions. Say that with me. EQ is not emotions. EQ is a set of learned skills that are distinct from academic skills, complementary to them, but they are designed to help you manage emotions. If you have low EQ, you're still going to have emotions. If you have high EQ, you're still going to have emotions. But high EQ helps you manage them successfully. So your success quotient, a measure of one's overall success in life based on stereotypical measures, based on what you think is success. But your success quotient is now believed to be a factor in health as well as in longevity. So if you perceive you're successful, studies show you're likely to be healthier and live longer than people who don't. So this is how the success formula goes. IQ plus EQ equals SQ. But note, they don't contribute equally. IQ contributes at most 20%. EQ contributes 80%. So I periodically work on trying to raise my IQ. You've got a range. Depending where you start, you can increase your IQ up to 30 points, researchers say. But eventually you'll come to a ceiling. But EQ is what I work on all the time, because that's 80% of my success, which impacts my health and longevity. And research shows that top performers use both of them in harmony, knowing that EQ gives you more bang for your buck. So workplace studies, successful managers, they tend often to have very average IQ, bell curve of distribution. Mean in the United States and Australia is 100. Under the bell curve goes from 85 to 115. So you get around the 100, 95, 100, 105. That's average IQ. But they have a very high EQ. The reverse is true. Unsuccessful managers often have a really high IQ but a very low EQ. And, I think about Steve Jobs and the stories about Steve Jobs. Brilliant IQ. EQ's just out the back door somewhere. Got fired from the company he started. So EQ is very, very important, and it's only since about 1995 that we've even been learning about it. Now, what can building IQ skills and applying them do for you? Here are a few things. It helps you build and maintain stable, rewarding interpersonal relationships. When you have a difference of opinion, and that's easy to do because every brain is different, you can still communicate in affirming ways that minimize conflict. Low EQ, you're going to have a bad time. Reduce negative stress while at the same time increasing your health, happiness, success, and maybe even your potential longevity. It allows you to share your brain's opinion as honestly and graciously as possible. And I don't even usually do that unless I'm asked, because who cares? But if you do need to share it, you can do it honestly and graciously, but also remain relatively indifferent as to whether or not your opinion is accepted. If I have an opinion and somebody doesn't agree with me, that's fine. We just have a different perspective. Doesn't mean yours is bad or mine is bad. It's just different. But with low EQ, you tend to believe if they disagree with you, then there's something wrong with them. And if you talk louder and longer, maybe you will actually convince them to believe what you believe. And that's pretty much a dead-end street. And it helps to prevent, minimize, and resolve conflict. Conflict is expensive. And it's not necessarily just expensive in terms of money, but of distress, physical and mental health, relationship, personal and professional failures. And remember this. In fact, read this with me. 70% of contributors to conflict in the present involves what? Your past. So we get into a conflict situation in the present, and we blame that blank, 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 whoever. 70% of the conflict is my past, what I learned and how it differs from that, and what my self-esteem wants to do with that, and all kinds of things. So 70% is a lot. And anytime I feel like I'm in a conflict situation, I am learning to say, Arlene, what might have happened in the past that made you sensitive to this so you even care? I should be able to give you my opinion and not care whether you take it or not, because it's your brain and your life. And I'm learning to do that. It's taken me more than a week, but I'm learning. Now, human beings, researchers don't agree exactly what human beings are, but they are at least sexual, relational, and spiritual. Spiritual defined as the spirit in which you live life. It may or may not have anything to do with religion. And it's important to understand that. Many people are unaffiliated with religion and have a wonderful level of spirituality, appreciative of what's happening in life, loving nature, wanting to protect the planet, helping others. And there are people affiliated with religion whose spirituality is pretty low. So they don't necessarily align. Now, when either your spiritual or emotional intelligence is low, research says it is impossible to achieve healthy relationships or to provide healthy leadership, because they go together. Rather, it will reflect your own family of origin issues, the spoken and unspoken rules handed down to you, your own unique brain function, bad things that happen to you that you haven't processed, healed, and let go, all packaged in layers of cellular memory from 3 or 4 generations of your biological ancestors. So that should put a little different spin on conflict. Peter Scarzzo, who wrote Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, said this. Read this one with me. Christian spirituality without an integration of emotional health can be deadly to yourself, your relationship to God, and the people around you. It is impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. Family patterns from the past are played out in our present relationships without us necessarily even being aware of it. So it's like twins here. Spiritual and emotional intelligence. The human brain wants to feel good. If it can't find ways to feel good in a healthy way, maybe because they don't even know how to do that, then they will try to get there in an unhealthy way. And we mentioned this morning that only 10 to 15% of what goes on in the mind ever comes to conscious awareness. And that's the part you want to manage with emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is not an emotion. I'm saying it again. I want you to really get that. It's the ability to know what feels good, what feels bad, and how to get from bad to good in a way that results in positive outcomes, not using some artificial method that's going to give you a little pseudo joy, but it only lasts a little while, and now you have to go looking for something else. There are some myths about EQ. It does not equate with being nice. It equates with being graciously functional. Hope you never catch me being nice. Nice simply means that you're doing whatever anyone else wants you to do and think you ought to do. Graciously functional is entirely different. It does not mean giving free rein to your feelings. It means learning to manage them effectively. It is not genetically fixed because you don't inherit it. You build the skills. Fortunately, it is not just developed in childhood. You can start developing it any time you want to. It is not higher in females. It's about equal in males and females. When Goldman released his first book on emotional intelligence, mid-90s, 95, most people had never even heard of the term. They had no idea what it meant, no idea the impact that it had on their lives. They had no idea that there was a metaphorical continuum on which you could plot behaviors. When I read a book, I like to figure out who the protagonists are and figure out, okay, they did this behavior. Did that give them positive outcomes, so therefore it's high on the EQ continuum, or did it give them abysmally awful outcomes, so it was very low? And that's a good way to practice. So the higher your EQ becomes, the quicker you recognize low EQ in yourself, and certainly you recognize it more quickly in others, and sometimes that's helpful to protect yourself. Goldman talks about what he calls 4 domains about what EQ involves. He says it involves self-awareness, knowing what you feel or sense, knowing how EQ can help you with a moral compass. And we talked about thinking this morning. Self-management, handling distressing emotions effectively. Self-empathy, that's way beyond sympathy. Self-empathy is a sense of experiencing what you think they might be experiencing, which can actually make you a little more effective in dealing with them. And self-social skills, meaning you put it all together, apply it in all relationships, in all situations, regardless of race, culture, gender, anything. And that's pretty amazing. You can't buy that. Goldman pointed out that children need to learn this, but they learn it by watching adults. So if the adults around them have high levels of EQ, at least they get to observe it. They may not choose to do it, but they get to see what that looks like. And that only is positive if the adults role model the behavior, if they verbalize what they're doing and tell the children the reason they're doing it, and the reason and the type of outcome they're looking at. You know, like that person just rear-ended my car. Okay, I could get really angry. It's a done deal. I can't fix that. What I can fix is how I'm responding to this. So I'm going to just calmly get the information, call my insurance company, get it taken care of, because I don't want to create any more bad feelings, then I need to have my vehicle fixed. And you actually role model and you talk about it, and there's a higher likelihood they're going to copy it. And in school settings, when this is done, studies have shown that antisocial behaviors in children decreased by 10%, and their pro-social skills increased by 10%. Did I say decreased by 10%? This increased by 10%. That was a snapshot in time. So 3 or 4 years later, it might be much higher, but that was initially. Their academic achievement scores increased by 11%. And some children began copying these other children who were learning these skills, copying them from the other kids, not necessarily just from the adults. And sometimes, the researchers said, little broken hearts began to mend. As the adults talked about, that really hurt me, but this is how, emotional intelligence is helping me deal with that. 8 skills related to high emotional intelligence. Ask yourself, is this a skill I've got? Have I learned this skill? You are able to identify, accurately label, assess the level of intensity, and express your emotions appropriately. You can recognize what the emotion's trying to tell you. Remember, emotions are designed to bring information from the subconscious to the conscious. It will usually be trying to tell you something that's joyful, something that is invading your boundaries because anger surfaces, something that you may be in danger from, so fear surfaces, or a loss and sadness surfaces. You are able to delay gratification and exhibit good impulse control. That's always tricky. You can articulate the difference, you can state it, you can talk about it, between recognizing and identifying a specific emotion and whether or not you need to do anything at the moment. Sometimes there's nothing you need to do right now, but you need to learn from what happened. And when this happens next time, you will be prepared. Maybe you'll even be able to avoid it next time. You can listen, read, and interpret social cues and understand the perspective of others, even if it differs from yours. That goes back to you state your opinion, and it's none of your business whether it's taken or not. You are able to exhibit effective verbal and nonverbal skills along with empathy and compassion, different from sympathy. You can manage your own feelings and moods successfully. A mood is just a feeling you hang on to for a long time. And you know when to ask for help. You are able to handle relationships effectively, minimizing job behaviors and replacing them with AAA. All right, what does that mean? There are some common behaviors that represent very low levels of emotional intelligence, and I have named those JOT behaviors. And they are jumping to conclusions. I'm sure you never do that. Overreacting. I'm very sure you never do that. And taking things personally. Some estimates are that those 3 behaviors alone account for 50 to 75% of all conflict situations. So what kind of skills did you learn growing up? Did you learn any? My parents didn't know anything about EQ. Did the best they could, but they didn't know anything about EQ. So I didn't learn anything about EQ. When Goldman's book came out and I started understanding EQ, I said, I got work to do. Better start now. So how do you start raising your EQ? Well, by dumping JOT behaviors and replacing them with AAA behaviors. So what are AAA behaviors? Well, I think of AAA as a type of insurance. Instead of roadside insurance, it's life-side insurance. And it helps you begin to stop doing JOT behaviors and exhibit healthier behaviors. So what are AAA behaviors? Well, the first A is you ask questions And that's going to clarify things and help prevent you from jumping to conclusions, because you don't know till you ask. 2 is you act calmly as you assess the situation, and you refrain from launching into a reactive emotional tsunami that usually creates a big mess that you have to clean up if it's even cleanable. You know, you burn some bridges and you can never rebuild those bridges. And high EQ would likely have prevented burning the bridge. And 3rd, you alter your perception or put a new frame around the picture, put a new frame around the event to avoid taking things personally. In any conflict situation, what percentage has to do with your background? Better get up and walk around. What percentage has to do with your background? 70%. That's huge. So, if 70% of any conflict is due to your background, then reframing the situation can help. I will often ask myself, if a stranger walked into the middle of this conflict, what would it look like to them? Then I'm less tempted to take it personally, because it may have nothing to do with me, or it may have everything to do with me. Couple caveats. There is a brain function in the prefrontal cortex called willpower. People misuse it all the time. They don't understand it. Willpower was not designed to stop a bad behavior, especially one that gave you momentary rewards. It was designed to help you implement a better behavior. So you use willpower to implement AAA behaviors. Telling your brain to stop JOP behaviors will not be helpful. But using willpower to implement AAA behaviors can be. So what do low EQ behaviors look like in adults? It's not pretty. So ask yourself if you've got any of these characteristics. Adults who are emotional babies, which I would put at 0 EQ, they cannot delay gratification. They're always trying to get someone else to take care of them. They use tantrums, different ways to have tantrums. Silent treatment is a tantrum. I had one man tell me that his wife hadn't spoken to him for 7 years. I told him, is that a good thing or not? But that would be a tantrum. They tend to view others as a means to their own ends, and they're often either very over-controlling or, I don't care, walk all over me, it doesn't matter. Those are the adults who are babies in terms of emotional intelligence. Those who are children, sort of like age, 4 to 10, something like that. And you know, you can find a 50-year-old who's a baby in terms of emotional intelligence. Pout, whine, complain, throw tantrums, throw objects, stamp their feet metaphorically, withdraw or isolate if what they want is not quickly forthcoming. Tend to take disappointments or a simple difference of opinion very personally. Maybe sarcastic or retaliate with threats like, you never loved me, or I'm leaving. They act hurt very easily. They complain of being, I'm so stressed. If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't feel like this. Well, they are a real challenge to deal with. Adults who are teenagers emotionally tend to live very defensively and argue the moment they think someone is criticizing them. They may not even be criticizing them. Remember, taking things personally is a JOP behavior. They're really unable to deal with conflict. They either blame somebody else or I'm not going to talk about it, not going to discuss it. They are very critical and judgmental of others. So if you have low self-esteem and you only feel good about yourself if you think you're better than somebody else, then your whole mission in life is to find people who are doing something that I would never do, which therefore gives me a momentary shot of higher self-esteem. But it doesn't last, and it's ridiculous. They are self-absorbed, find it very difficult, if not impossible, to empathize with others. You start telling them something that was very stressful for you, and they interrupt, and they're going to tell you their sad story because it's sadder than yours. And they often lie or exaggerate, which is often a typical lying, unless you are using something in a joke to exaggerate, because they have to look good to other people. They cannot admit they made a mistake. They have to look good. Now, this is very much like teenagers are. They're very narcissistic. The teenage brain is a narcissistic brain. The whole goal of growing up is to mature out of narcissism into a balanced adulthood. Teenagers who do not grow out of the narcissistic stage tend to become sometimes even sociopaths in adulthood. This is not genetic. This is learned. And the more adults can teach high EQ skills to teenagers, the easier it is to help them move out of the narcissistic stage, where it's all about me. Okay, where are we? Let's take a break. You ready for a break? Get up and move. And you can think about brain benders as you're walking around if you want. And Dr. Lowe will collect half tickets. Keep half, or you won't know what your number was.
Okay, Chickalaboomba. We're going to go for our last series, and then we'll have the drawings for your reward for sticking by us here. Not that you can't be bought or anything, but you can be bought. All right, so we've really appreciated Arlene being with us and staying on for so many presentations, as she always does. I'll know that she's getting tired when she says, "Oh, can I only do 3 presentations?" Then I know she's starting to lose it.
You were talking that way. What did you say?
I said, I'll know you're getting old and tired when you say, "Oh, can I only do 3 presentations instead of 5?"
That'll never happen.
All right.
Okay, you've been looking at brain benders? We ought to whiz through these. Ready to go? Top left. Which way is the spelling going? All right, so it's uptown. All right. Second on the left. West wind, wind blowing from the left, whatever. Third on the left. We did this once before. What's the word? Yell. Yellow. Yell, and it's low in the box. Bottom left. Unfinished symphony. Good job. Top right. All right, there you go. That's a touchdown. Good job. All right, second on the right. All eyes are on the game. You're getting good. How about this one? Third on the right. One for all and all for one. That's pretty basic. And bottom right. Broken promises. Good job. Do you see how much easier it's happening? This is only like your 3rd or 4th set. You're almost ready to write them. You know, and this happens. I'll do a presentation and I'll get emails and somebody will say, "I thought of a brain bender." And usually they're very good and I use them. So let me tell you about an interesting experience I had with these. I was asked to lecture in a penitentiary. I had not done that before. And I thought about it and I thought, well, what can be so bad about that? I'll go do it. So I arrive at the penitentiary. It's somewhere up in Oregon. 3 checkpoints I have to go through, and they keep taking things away from me. Pretty soon I didn't have much left. I was clothed, but that's about it. And then I had a long, maybe 4 times the length of this building to walk over to get into the cell block. And they took a big red flannel heart and pasted it on my jacket. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, what is this for? And they said, when you're walking across the courtyard, do not begin to run, do not make any gestures, do not act like there's any problem, because if you do, they're taught to shoot for the red heart. And I began to think, what am I doing here? So I get to the cell block, this big guard, and I'm looking up at him and he says, all right, we're going to walk down Main Street. And I'm going, Main Street? I said, what does that mean? He says, well, between the 2 cell blocks is Main Street. I said, oh, okay. We're walking down Main Street, look straight ahead, do not smile, do not look at anyone, do not say anything. I was beginning to feel like I had made a big mistake. So finally we get down to wherever their auditorium was, and I'm guessing it was almost this size. They took me in, set me down in a chair, and I'm sitting here. He said, at 7 o'clock, there's going to be a buzzer that rings, and the men who have said they want to come and hear you talk, their cell door will open, and they'll come in and sit down, and when everybody's in here, then you can start. So I'm sitting on the platform waiting. I hear the buzzer, the door opens, and in comes walking these guys in bright orange clothing. And they sit down, 120 of them, fold their arms and just stare at me. Oh, that could be slightly unnerving. And so I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to talk to these men who are just sitting there, arms folded, staring at me? I wonder if they even care about brain information, or did they just want to get out of their cells for a couple hours? So I was introduced, and I stood up, and this is what I said. Gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here. This is my first experience at speaking in a penitentiary. Actually, it puts a slightly different spin on the words captive audience. I said, that didn't come out of my mouth. It's exactly what came out of my mouth. Big guy in the middle, 6'8", 300 pounds, bright red hair. All of a sudden, he slaps his thigh, and I thought one of the guards at the back had shot his gun. Because we're locked in here, and they told me, if you get abducted, we will not rescue you. Thank you very much. So he looks around, he says, guys, I think the woman's going to be okay. So I plop a set of brain benders up. I kid you not. I could hardly get to the next one fast enough than they'd already solved it, and sometimes with 2 solutions. We went through this whole thing in like 20 seconds. And I'm looking at them and I said, I've been doing this all over the world for longer than you've been alive. And you have done it faster than any group I have ever spoken to. Red hair goes, well, just because we're in here doesn't mean we're stupid. One of the other guys says, sure does, that's why we're in here. It was a very scary experience, but very amazing. I was doing 2 presentations, and at the break, the chaplain came up to me and he says, Dr. Taylor, you're just way over their heads. I mean, these people aren't very bright. I can't imagine they're understanding anything you're saying. So when we had the break, this is what he says to them. All right, let's just talk among ourselves a little bit. Tell somebody about the most favorite pet you've had. Okay. At the end of the second session, he says to me, are you willing to take a few questions? I said, all right. Those guys asked fabulous questions, very complicated. They'd understood everything I'd said. They gave me a 10-minute standing ovation. I didn't do it. I was praying the whole time. Several of them said, if I had known this information about the brain, I would never have ended up in jail. So they asked me back the next year. I haven't gone. I sent them some material instead. It was pretty scary. I mean, to be told, if they kidnap you, we're not going to rescue you. Anyway, fastest. But you were pretty good. And you weren't in jail. All right, can you rewire your brain for success? Yes, you can. And I've shown you this before. I want you to read it out loud with me one more time so you really believe it. Your habitual attitudes form neural circuits in the brain. If you choose to maintain a specific attitude, the brain can literally rewire itself to facilitate that attitude. which is your preferred attitude of the 4 core emotions? Joy. Now, that doesn't mean that you like everything that happens in life. It means that you know when bad things happen, as they will, you do have the tools to problem solve, look for options, or ask for help. So there's really no need to be down in the dumps for 7 years. But it starts in the brain. Now, conflict. We talked about one of the benefits of high levels of EQ is preventing, minimizing, or resolving conflict. Conflict is expensive. Large sample studies show that in the home, conflict contributes to unhappiness, illness, stress, addictions, divorce, violence, and murder. In schools and churches, it burns out personnel and triggers misunderstandings, and 4 or 5 hour-long board meetings when everybody is wrangling about the color of the carpet. Very adult, very high EQ. And in the workplace, managers spend 18% of their time managing employee conflicts, which when you analyze them pretty much are jot behaviors, low EQ, jumping to conclusions, overreacting, and taking things personally. Now, here's what's even more sad. The same study was done in 1996. Back then, managers spent 9% of their time managing employee conflicts. 10 years later, they're spending 18% of their time. What company wants to pay their managers nearly 1/5 of their salary just trying to mediate employee conflicts? It's expensive. So, and I will show you before we're finished, Dr. Singh of India, among others, is working to develop an emotional intelligence examination so that it can be vetted and used by employers to help them make hiring decisions. Because all things being equal, what do you want? An employee with low EQ or high EQ? That is a no-brainer. Building EQ skills begins with examining yourself and knowing who you are. Not what somebody tells you you are, not what somebody tells you you need to be, but who are you? How does your brain work? What are your innate strengths? What typical behaviors do you exhibit? When do you jump to conclusions? When do you overreact? When do you take things personally? It begins with recognizing what happened to you. Are you adopted? Were you a foster child? Did you come from a relatively functional home or a very dysfunctional home? What do you know about your biological ancestors? Because behaviors are passed down through cellular memory. Or if you're adopted, what do you know about your adoptive family background? Because they will be acting out what their ancestors did. It involves identifying traumas, we've all had them, that kept you from maturing emotionally and spiritually. I told you when I was 15, my mother told me I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. And I believed her till I was 30. Now that's ridiculous. But the brain, really the prefrontal cortex isn't done till late 20s or 30. So when I really started analyzing that, I realized it didn't have much to do with me. It had to do, she was a first-generation college graduate and a doctor? I mean, that's way beyond anything she and her sister envisioned. It didn't really have anything to do with me, but I believed her for 15 years, which is too bad. So as you go through this process, and I had to forgive myself for believing her, and forgiving her for saying it in a way that a kid with a brain that wasn't done yet took it as gospel. So what you learn might be a little hard to acknowledge to start with, but every bit of information I learn just helps me be more successful. It's worth the work. And Socrates supposedly said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Now, I think that's a bit hard. But if you really want to be high EQ and successful, then if you're not examining who you are and what you've been taught and what you've learned and the experiences you've had, and have you grieved them and let them go, and are you growing, well, how are you going to be successful? And you really aren't. I love this list, 2 lists that Goldman put together. Mature adults, okay, that's usually somebody who's at least 27, 28, 29, 30. Levels of maturity, but brain, prefrontal cortex, probably not done till late 20s. So mature adults with high EQ skills tend to exhibit these behaviors. And those with low EQ skills tend to exhibit these behaviors. Now take a look at those. Satisfied or frustrated? Aware or unaware? Balanced, unstable, up 1 minute, down another. Peaceful, very restless. Good self-esteem, poor self-worth. Happy, grateful, appreciative for what you have, or unhappy, blaming everybody, being critical of others, and judgmental. High EQ, motivated, contented with where you are at the moment, even as you are learning more and growing. Connected. You can connect with others. Calm. Interdependent. You're not independent or dependent. You're interdependent. Energetic. Perceive success compared to dejected, angry, lonely, stressed, dependent, fatigued, and perceive failure. So looking at those 2 lists, ask yourself, if you were an employer, who do you want to hire? I mean, that doesn't even take a lot of thought. Who would you like to work with in the workplace? Who do you want to live with? When you're looking at someone you want to live with for the rest of your life, who do you want? The best way I know of to get interested in somebody with these types of high EQ behaviors is to become that person. Because water seeks its own level. You've heard that term. So does EQ, so do behaviors. So if you have these characteristics, you are attracted to people who also have them, and you are attractive to them. And that kind of brain connection is a fine way to start out evaluating a relationship. EQ helps you manage emotions and the feelings that result from those emotions. I think it's helpful to understand British Lancet, the journal in Britain, clearly says in their research that emotions and feelings follow 2 separate pathways in the brain. Remember this morning we talked about motor neurons and sensory neurons. One goes this way, one goes this way, 2 separate pathways. Well, emotions and feelings have separate pathways as well. So you're not responsible for every thought that crosses your brain. We talked about that earlier. You are not responsible for every emotion that surfaces, because emotions can be triggered by something outside of yourself as well as something inside of yourself. But you're responsible for the feelings you hang on to. Because when an emotion surfaces, the brain, remember the frontal left lobe wants to make sense of how come this happened. And the brain's analysis of what just happened, its conclusion, is your feeling about what happened. So, because your brain created your feeling, you can change the way you feel anytime you want to. Remember, how do you change the way you feel? What do you have to change? The way you are thinking. Because feelings follow thoughts. So if you don't like the way you're feeling, change what you're thinking, and your feelings will follow. Just to remind you, emotional impulses arise in this middle layer. And you can get an emotional impulse from something happening inside of yourself, or you can get one from something that triggers it in the environment. Your prefrontal cortex, the only part that's conscious, it is believed, if you're managing it, to be able to moderate your emotional expression, meaning not everybody, when the emotion of anger surfaces, lashes out and changes the configuration of somebody else's nose. You know, your prefrontal cortex helps you moderate whether you're going to act out that emotion. If you don't have good EQ skills, it can be a little more difficult. The signals from the subconscious that you get when an emotion arises are interpreted into feelings right here in the prefrontal cortex. And the brain interprets them based on what it thinks you think about what happened. How important is it to you? How much weight are you going to give it? Is it a big deal or isn't it a big deal? So we talk about the emotions, feelings cascade. And just think of a waterfall that has several layers. You've seen those. Yosemite's got some of them. So this is what happens. An internal or external stimulus triggers an emotion. Think of that as the first cascade. The brain tries to make sense of what's going on because the emotion will change your physiology. All emotions change physiology. When you are in the grip of a really strong emotion, what changes in your body? What changes? A lot of things change. Your heart may beat faster. Your breathing may be faster or slower. You may get sweaty palms. You may get perspiration on your forehead. You may get butterflies in your stomach. Those are all physiological changes triggered by the emotion to get your attention. It's the only way it gets your attention. Something changes, otherwise how would it get your attention? So now you figure out, identify the emotion, describe it, what's going on here, what do I want my response to be? And as your brain interprets that, you get your feelings. Your brain creates them. So, you get the emotion, your brain tries to make sense of it, you think a thought, this means, then you become aware of the feeling that follows the thought. Now you have a choice. Here's free will again. Doesn't operate till now. You have a choice to hang on to the feeling and exhibit a behavior, or change the thought, which changes the feeling, which changes the behavior that you're going to exhibit. It's pretty simple. As long as you get the cascade, you can interrupt it at pretty much any time. When you understand that your feelings are connected to what you think about the event and not about the event itself, then you gain a measure of both perspective and control. That's been the single most helpful thing for me well, so much of it's been helpful, but that's been really helpful because I clearly understand when a feeling arises based on an emotion and what I'm thinking, you know, it might have something to do with this event, but maybe not very much about the event, more about what I think that event means to me. How much importance am I giving to that? And that is immensely empowering because you are no longer at the mercy of your emotions and feelings. You know what to do about them. Does that make sense to you? Up and down means yes. Okay, to recap. IQ plus EQ equals SQ. Memorize that. IQ worth 20%, EQ worth 80%. EQ skills are learned, but top performers use them both in harmony, knowing that EQ far outweighs whatever your IQ is. Goleman also talks about dimensions, psychological dimensions. I want to just briefly go through these with you, and then I'll give you some examples about the test questions that Dr. Singh is developing. So Singh talks about emotional competency in a slightly different way from Goleman, but it's similar concept: emotional maturity and emotional sensitivity. So emotional competency means this: you tackle emotional upsets. You avoid emotional exhaustion. You don't stuff it. You don't develop a slush fund of unresolved problems. You just deal with it. You have good self-esteem. Optimum is the goal, not under or over inflated. You've got a balanced appreciation of who you are. You know how to handle your egoism. You know how to handle your self-esteem. You take the initiative to prevent or resolve problems. Blaming is never any help. I remember one time I was called to a department in the hospital because this employee was overreacting, throwing things at the wall, actually. I walked in and he had his laptop in hand and he was ready to throw that, and there were already several things stuck in the wall: scissors, letter opener, you know, stapler, whatever. So I said, "Stop!" And he stopped and looked at me, and I said, "Please tell me what you're angry about." "I'm not angry." Now, would you suggest that might be unaware? And I said, "Whatever label you want, talk to me about the wall." "Well, I'm just a little frustrated." Okay, frustration is anger. I said, "Take a deep breath. Please tell me what you're frustrated about." "Well, it's all her fault." I said, "Whose fault?" "One of my colleagues." I said, "Well, tell me what she did." "She offered to get me a cup of coffee, and she's not back yet." And I said, "Where'd she go to get the cup of coffee?" "To the cafeteria." I said, "Do you know how far the cafeteria is away from this office?" "Well, it's not right next door." I said, "Walking quickly, it takes 7 minutes. How long's she been gone?" 4.5. Okay, there is an adult who is functioning as a baby in terms of emotional intelligence. It's pathetic. So, he didn't work there anymore. And he had a fair amount of a bill to repair the wall and so on. All of that's avoidable. He could not wait, and he is blaming her. "I'm upset because she's not back yet." Well, she's doing you a favor, and it takes 7 minutes to get there, and then you gotta wait while they pour the coffee, and then you gotta walk back. I felt like saying, "What is your problem? Go yourself next time and put in the 15 minutes. Well, after a while he says to me, well, it may not be her fault, I'm just choosing to blame her. You know how to use tactful responses to emotional stimuli, and sometimes no visible behavioral response is what's appropriate. You just get the information. You protect yourself if you need to, but you just get the information. And then later on in a similar situation, you'll be better prepared. Talks about emotionally mature. We talked about awareness is the first step on the continuum. So you are self-aware. As the brain matures, you gain more and more self-awareness. You take care of yourself, and you're concerned about the care of others. That's the superego that lives up in that third layer. If you were lucky, you grew up with parents who had good levels of superego. That means they took good care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and they also took care of you. If you had parents with poor superegos, let's say that you're a year and a half old and for some reason you got a bellyache and you start crying in the middle of the night, parents with a good superego will hop up and come and try to help you feel better, even if it disturbed their sleep. Parents with poor superegos will hear you crying and yell, "Shut up, I'm trying to sleep." And if you don't shut up, they'll get up and come in there and beat on you and make you feel twice as bad as you did when you were crying. That's unfortunate. Able to delay gratification, oh my. Poor guy that was lobbing stuff at the wall could not delay gratification even long enough for it to get back there. You're adaptable. Every brain has their own opinion. You know yours. And you may or may not choose to alter it, but you know what it is and you know how to be flexible at the moment, which doesn't necessarily mean agreeing, but it might mean taking a different action. You can brainstorm options successfully. There's usually an option. May not be your first choice, but there is an option. And sensitivity. When something triggers an emotion in the mammalian layer and you begin to sense it in your body because of the physiological changes, you don't have to be hit over the head to realize that this is happening. Meaning, when I said to that man, "Please tell me what you're angry about," and he goes, "I'm not angry." Okay, well, you'd have to hit him over the head to get him to realize this is the emotion of anger. You're very sensitive, so you begin to recognize that early, and you can use the information it gives you and take appropriate action. You can be empathetic, not just sympathetic, but you can be empathetic. You really care when somebody is not feeling good. You care when they're acting out, and when they're calmer, hopefully you can help them see a different picture. You are not knocked down by the choices of others. That's so important. Somebody does something that is not very kind, it might even negatively impact you, but it doesn't put you in a blue funk for 6 months. That was their stuff. All you're concerned about is your response to that. And you basically communicate positive emotion to yourself, to others, through the way you think, through your self-talk, through your actions. That's emotional sensitivity. Now, so far, EQ cannot be measured by any IQ test because it's not IQ. It's separate. So Dr. Singh is one of the researchers that is trying to develop this set of questions that employers will be able to give to potential applicants. And see, all things being equal, whoever has the highest EQ might have the edge for getting hired. So I read one of Dr. Singh's books, and he was talking about people who were criticizing the attempt to develop an EQ test. And they said to him, well, supposing somebody scores really high on the test and you hire them, and then they turn out to be just horrible in terms of behaviors, what good was the test? And Dr. Singh said something I thought was very profound. He goes, if they knew enough about EQ to score high, but their performance does not reflect high EQ, the test now is a management tool. So you call them in and you say, you scored really high on the emotional intelligence assessment, but here are the behaviors that you have exhibited this last week, which are all low EQ behaviors. Talk to me about the disconnect in your brain. You know what is high EQ, but your performance is not exhibiting that. So I think that would be a great tool. So here are some of his questions. They're all multiple choice, and one answer, he says, represents highest EQ. So let's see what you think. I think I brought 6 of them. You're in a group. You submit your idea. It's rejected out of hand. You feel totally put down and tell others how unfair it was what they did. You analyze reasons that your idea was not accepted. You figure winning and losing are all part of the game. You win a few, you lose a few. Or you wait for the next opportunity to make sure you beat the people who rejected your idea. What's highest EQ? Who says number 2? Anybody have another opinion? 3. Well, a lot of people choose 3. And you're right that life is partly winning and losing. But Singh says if your basic premise is win a few, lose a few, you likely will start marking time instead of just really looking for a better solution. That may not be true for everybody, but he says, analyze the reason for the defeat is highest EQ because that will give you information to course correct the next time you may need to present an idea. Would there be a better way of presenting it now that you know more about the group? And so on. Question 2, explain your current life in one sentence. Okay, life's a 50-50 mixed experience. Successful. A contented person who has what could make you happy. You know happiness is a choice. Comfortable, but basically just a puppet in life. Or uncomfortable, a person who deserves better but can't get it. All right, what's highest EQ? 2. Dr. Singh would agree with you. A person who has what could make you happy, and you are staying focused on that even as you continue to grow. 3. When a hearing impaired person in your group misunderstands a phrase, you laugh with the others, ignore the incident, repeat the phrase so the person gets it, helps the person, and comments about the need to speak louder. Who thinks it's 3? Who thinks it's 4? All right. Singh says it's better to do 3 than nothing. But if you help the person and make a comment, such as, I suggest that we all speak a little louder so that, he doesn't or she doesn't miss anything. then you are role modeling to the group. He says it's the difference between giving a person a fish to eat and teaching them how to fish. Number 4, when newcomers with different opinions attend your group, you ignore them and hope they go away. Criticize them to others. Accept them as is and set your own boundaries as needed, or tell them to change in order to be accepted. 3, there you go. Accept them as is, because you can never make another brain change. However, you also set your own boundaries as needed to protect yourself and be safe. So far, this is still a free country. People still get to say what they want to say, even if it's very unwise. 5, when coworkers comment you're not very smart because you don't know the lingo, you ignore them, ask them to keep their opinions to themselves, thank you very much. Transfer to another department, or evaluate their comments, accept the challenge, and learn the lingo. Everybody for 4? Well, if you want to stay in the job, Singh says, accept the challenge and learn the lingo. If you don't, then you can start looking for another job. But view that comment as a gift. So instead of taking it personally, which is jot behavior, you are reframing that and saying, wow, they just told me that I need to know something if I want to be successful here. Okay, I like the job, I want to be successful here. Okay, I got to learn the lingo. Number 6, after involuntary and temporary transfer to a project with a new boss in a remote area, although you get a pay hike and the possibility of a promotion, you mark time waiting for the promotion. You enjoy the challenge and the pay raise. You complain or whine and say, why me? Or you jump the gun, resign, and look for another job. Number 2, now let me tell you about this. I did this for the freshman class. No sooner had read the options than somebody's hand goes up and the person says, Dr. Taylor, where's the remote area? I said, anywhere you want it to be. Well, I would need to know the remote area before I would need to know what to do. I said, no, actually you don't. All you need is to know this and what you think you would decide. But what if it's way off in Timbuktu? I said, so what if it is? You've got a pay raise and a promotion possibility. Well, what if I have a girlfriend and I don't want to leave her? Well, you do have some options. You can communicate by Skype. We don't know how long that's going to last. You can marry her and take her with you. You can find out maybe how a little distance impacts your relationship. That's immaterial to this. Well, how much do you think the pay raise would be? I'm thinking, boy, the brain is not done yet when you're a freshman. They're missing the whole point. That's why you have to be really patient with brains that aren't done yet. They're doing the best they can, but they don't got it yet. You know, your brain has to be developed enough for you to get to this level of thinking. That's why you need advisors that you trust and people to give you feedback. Even if you're 50, sometimes that can be very, very helpful. So I said to them, if you really, really, really don't care about how this comes across and you just go, I'm not going, and the boss says, if you don't go, you're fired, fine, I'll find another job, go for it. But the job market is not always wonderful, and you've got a good paying job with a pay increase and the possibility of a promotion. You're gonna have to really think through that. So what is it? What number? 3. Well, I'm not visual, and I thought somebody was putting up 3 fingers. 2, he says, enjoy the challenge and pay raise because your employment, your performance is going to be evaluated. And if you're out there getting a pay raise and whining and complaining, you may never get the pay raise. So that's an example of the kind of questions, and it would partly depend on the age of the person. You know, if you got an 18-year-old answering these, they probably would be answering them very differently from what Singh does. But there would be enough of a tendency usually to give the employer some idea. All right, last slide. With what we're learning about emotional intelligence, you cannot be successful without it, period. It's worth 80% of your success in personal and professional relationships and in leadership. That's pretty significant. The problem is, there's always a next class. You never graduate. And when I started raising my EQ, I kind of figured, you know, it's like going to school and after 4 years you get your bachelor's and now you're out doing something else. You never graduate from emotional intelligence school. There's always more to learn. The sky is the limit. The homework can be challenging. Homework means all of your relationships. Exams are tough to pass. There are people who get the picture, practice it for a while, find it, oh man, and give up. I am who I am. They got a fixed mindset. I am who I am. It can't be changed. That's the way it is. You want a growth mindset that says, my brain is always capable of improving, and I choose to build high levels of EQ. The good news is that as you build your EQ skills, your behaviors change. And people are always watching you. You know that. They're always watching you, especially young people. If they think you're successful, what have they done to be successful? The more you exhibit EQ skills, the more you can role model to younger people. It really, really makes a difference. And your level of EQ makes for successful relationships and successful leadership. So get on board. And the more you learn, the more fun it is. It really is. If I can do it knowing zero about EQ, anybody can.
Q&A at all? All right, did anybody not get a ticket that wants? Okay, someone want to get some tickets out there? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you just pass the ticket person.
Instead of doing one at a time, she did 4 or 5 at a time.
Exactly. This one. Anybody else not get one? You need one more? 2 more? 2 more? All right, Dr. Arlene, you get to pick them. You get the draw. All right, so we have Adventures of the Longevity Mystery Club and Solos Los Hechos, Age Proofing Your Brain. It's called Just the Facts. For those who don't know Spanish, it means just the facts.
Any of you know anyone who's a Spanish?
Anybody here Spanish and want to be able to pass it out in Spanish? Here's 3. Yeah, you want one? Spanish version of Just the Facts.
Here, let me run.
You know, It's the what is that? The Dragnet version, right? Yeah, just the facts, ma'am. Jack Webb, just the facts. Just the facts, ma'am. We have 3 more. If anyone. Oh, you got some more? Okay. All right. She wants to get rid of them. Okay, how does that make you feel on the self-esteem? All right. All right, ticket number 488877. 877, Carol. Okay. Which would you like, Carol? You can come on down.
Just come on down while he pulls another one.
Yep.
Let's get this show on the road.
Are you hungry or something?
I've been talking all day.
Okay. Well, then it's time for you to be quiet. Yeah. 488872. You take any of those, yeah. There's this one, and all these are the same. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. Just pick any of those. They're all the same now. Don't have much of a choice. They're all the same. All right. 488859. Okay, Lisa.
Actually, this is a pretty good way to do it, don't you think? I never can think of enough questions.
488864. 64. 864, last 3 digits. You lost it. How did you lose it? And you lost it. Okay. All right. Pick a book here. We're on the honor system. Go ahead. Oh, he was sitting. I don't want it. He was sitting on it. That's okay. I'm a germaphobe too. Okay. Next one. 488879. 879. Okay, Hong Shi. What? Okay. 851. 851. 851. Is anybody sitting on a ticket? Yeah. All right. 875. 875. Oh, Teddy back there. Okay. 840. 840? Okay, Rick. Got a few left here. 845. 845. Okay, Larry. Yeah. Yes. 843. Okay, Ellie. 843. All right, we have 3 left, okay. 850. 850. 850. They're not sitting on it, they're in the bathroom instead. Okay.
Is that jumping to conclusion?
Yeah, I guess. 869. 869. Oh, Dr. John. Yeah, you have a choice here between Adventures of Amy and the Adventures of the Longevity Mystery Club.
You might rather have the mystery club.
Okay, all right. 2 left. 874. 874. Oh, Eduardo. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, either one of those 2. Yeah. Is indecisiveness a sign of low EQ? No.
Couldn't read it.
All right, last one. 838. 838. All right, good. Come on. All right. There you go. And for everybody else, actually, we have some, for everybody, someone want to help pass these out? These are a magazine about Alzheimer's disease, since we're talking about the brain and all, brain function. I think we have enough for everyone. They are, okay. We want none of you to be a cover person on this magazine in the future, so you need to follow everything that Arlene told you to do this weekend. Right? So we wanted to thank you for coming. We do have other programs in regards to health that also will help your mind, particularly. I like what Arlene said. In fact, I heard something similar to what Arlene said at the very beginning of her talk Friday night, that your entire body's function is to support the brain. The entire function of your whole body is to support the brain. Because, and then what was very interesting is, if your brain is gone or your mind is gone, mainly your body has no purpose. It has no purpose. Kind of interesting thought when you think about that. You're going like, wow, that's interesting. Your mind is gone. Your body now has zero purpose because its whole purpose has been to support the brain, help it function. So taking care of your body is very important to preserving your brain, and vice versa. Now we know that the brain has a very powerful influence on the body. They're intertwined. So it goes both ways. So things that we have to help you improve the body is we have the Vegan Gourmet Club, which meets every month, the second Thursday of every month. The next one will come up August 8 at 6:30 here in the Fellowship Hall where we had the potluck. You're invited to come if you've never been. You don't have to bring any food if it's your first time. If you have come before, then we encourage you to come and share food with everybody. And bring your recipes if you have them. So we encourage you to do that. We have in the future, next year, in February 16, we'll have our whole conference, our annual whole conference, and it will be held in the high school auditorium, just about a block away, and that will feature a number of different people speaking. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Michael Greger of nutritionfacts.org. He will be speaking. We have Dr. Sean Hashmi, who's a nephrologist. We'll be covering pretty much the entire body. We'll have Dr. Angie Sadeghi, who's a gastroenterologist. We'll be talking about gut health and the microbiome. Doctors Shirzai, Dean and Aisha Shirzai from Loma Linda, will be talking about dementia and brain health. And so we have a chef who will be coming from Colorado who will be talking about cooking, whole food, plant-based diet. And we have a very interesting speaker, Tim Kaufman, who did a miraculous self-transformation. You'll hear his story and how he turned around his life with a whole food, plant-based diet and lifestyle with his wife, who will be very encouraging about dealing with the thinking of how to do. The whole stands for the why and the how of life-promoting eating. And not only will we have a chef demonstrating how, but also someone to tell you about the thinking, the healthy thinking about making that transition. His whole thing is healthy eating, healthy moving, and healthy thinking. And he will be addressing that aspect of helping people make the transition. So we encourage you to sign up for that. I think it's just now getting on the website, wholeconference.org, that you can sign up for tickets. The ticket sales will be good for until the end of the year of 2019, After that, the price goes up by $20 every month. So you want to get your tickets now, okay? That's just something for you to kind of keep in mind as we come to the close of the year. So thanks again for coming, and we appreciate you coming out to learn new things, and we'll probably have Dr. Arlene back next year. So stay tuned. Thank you again for coming. Good night.